May 1945, the war in Europe came to an end. This had been the price of Europe's unpreparedness. Our hard-won peace seemed at last secure. A few days before, Allied forces from the West had joined hands with the Russians from the East. Their statesmen had met cordially at Yalta and at Potsdam. They had agreed that the countries they had occupied should be truly liberated, and that freely elected governments should be set up as soon as possible. Russia had swallowed up 8 European countries without firing another shot. Great Britain and the United States protested that these countries had been coerced by threat of force, and that Russia had broken her treaty. But Russia ignored the protest. On April 4, 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty was signed between France, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, Norway, Denmark, Italy, Portugal, Iceland, Canada, and the United States. The pact was designed to keep within the letter and spirit of the United Nations Charter. The treaty members realized that real peace is more than an absence of war, and they seek to promote political and economic stability in the North Atlantic area. To ensure this, they are sworn to stand together against aggression. An attack against one would be an attack against all. This union of 12 nations became known as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or more simply, NATO. In February 1952, the 12 nations of the Atlantic Alliance had become 14, with the accession of Greece and Turkey. In the spring of 1955, that press and delegates welcomed the chief representative of a new member nation, Dr. Konrad Adenauer, Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany. With this nation taking her place, the 14 became 15.
That was on the 5th of May 1955 when West Germany joined NATO, and then not long after, on the 14th of May 1955, that was when the Warsaw Pact was founded. And here is a map with the green being NATO and the red being the Warsaw Pact. And it was formally titled the Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation and Mutual Assistance. And the 8 members were Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, Romania and the Soviet Union. And then moving on with our timeline of events, you had the Cuban Missile Crisis.
How do you know this is a medium-range ballistic missile?
And so after October of 1962, the Soviet missiles in Cuba were removed, and there was also missiles in NATO nations that were also removed. And in 1982, that is when Spain becomes a member of NATO. And so we're in 1989 and the Berlin Wall's coming down, which leads us to 1990 and the reunification of Germany. And for the negotiations, there were some very interesting and important exchanges. One I'd like to share with you between James Baker, former US Secretary of State and former leader of the USSR, Gorbachev, from February 1990. And now this is Baker speaking. Would you prefer a united Germany outside of NATO that is independent and has no US forces, or would you prefer a united Germany with ties to NATO and assurance that there would be no extension of NATO's current jurisdiction eastward? And so now we're in 1991 and we see the end of the USSR and obviously then the end of the Warsaw Pact.
So the first Bush keeps his promise. You assume it's a promise. They talk about partnership for peace, and Russians kind of like that idea. And then Clinton comes in. What's the early thing he does in his first term? He expands NATO. Why expand NATO?
And so despite the Soviet Union ending in the early 90s, in the late 90s, they still expanded NATO to Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic.
And in expanding NATO, created the issue that allows the authoritarianism that has returned to say it was justified. And I think that it was a blunder of monumental proportions. When I was at Oxford, I spent a lot of time on the origins of the Cold War. And, I read all these documents, and, all of the documents. And it's, the Russians were responsible, basically, Here, it's unfortunate. It's a blunder of vision. And in the best of circumstances, it was bureaucratic inertia in NATO that people had to have a job. In the worst of circumstances, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy with certain people in the Clinton administration who were irredentist, East European types who believe Russia will forever be the enemy, and therefore we got to protect against the time where they might once again be aggressive, thereby creating a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, I'll read to you a bit of this report to give you a bit of an idea and as a bit of a recap of what's happened so far before we go into the 2000s. The future of NATO and the enlargement of the alliance. United States membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, was established as an alliance of common defense among democratic and market-oriented governments in North America and Western Europe on August 24, 1949. With the entry into force for the North Atlantic Treaty, original members include the United States, Canada, and 10 European countries emerging from the destruction of World War II. Great Britain, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Portugal, Denmark, Norway, Luxembourg, Iceland, and Italy. Subsequently, the alliance has been enlarged on 3 separate occasions to include Greece and Turkey in 1952, the Federal Republic of Germany in 1955, and Spain in 1982. NATO has been central to peace and stability in Europe for almost 50 years and provides the United States with an ongoing and direct leadership role in European security affairs.
Each of the NATO ambassadors came to me, led by the Canadian ambassador, and they said, we want to invoke Article 5. The treaty says in Article 5, an attack on one of us will be considered an attack on all of us. And this was the guarantee that if Stalin or Khrushchev had attacked in the darkest days of the Cold War, the United States would come again across the Atlantic to protect Europe. And the great irony is, we only invoked Article 5 once in the history of those 70 years of NATO, and that was September 12, 2001. On the next day, we all sat around the table, the NATO ambassadors, and on behalf of our governments, we invoked Article 5. And the irony is, it was the Europeans and Canadians coming to the defense of the United States. And what that meant was that when we went into Afghanistan following 9/11, every NATO ally came in with us. Every NATO ally has fought with us. They have suffered more than 1,000 combat deaths. The European allies and the partners, they paid the price with us. You can't buy an alliance like that in the world today.
Yep, that's been the only time Article 5 has been invoked. And now we're in 2004, where NATO welcomes Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia. And now I'm going to show you a clip of George Bush from 2008.
So we spent a lot of time talking about NATO. First, I do want to remind people that Ukraine and the NATO alliance have built a strong partnership. Ukraine is the only non-NATO nation supporting every NATO mission. In Afghanistan and Iraq, Ukrainian troops are helping to support young democracies. In Kosovo, Ukrainians are helping keep the peace. Ukraine now seeks to deepen its cooperation with the NATO alliance through a membership action plan. Your nation has made a bold decision, and the United States strongly supports your request. In Bucharest this week, I will continue to make America's position clear. We support MAP for Ukraine and Georgia. Helping Ukraine move toward NATO membership is in the interest of every member in the alliance and will help advance security and freedom in this region and around the world.
Now, America really wanted Ukraine to be part of NATO, but it did not happen because you need approval from all members of NATO to join, and Germany and France did not approve of Ukraine joining. Okay, and then in 2009, Albania and Croatia joined NATO, and in 2017, Montenegro also joined, and this also happened.
In the port city of Bremerhaven on Germany's North Sea coast, approximately 4,000 American troops and 2,500 vehicles began arriving in early January. Known as the Iron Brigade, they're from the Army's 3rd Armored Brigade Combat Team of the 4th Infantry Division, based in Fort Carson, Colorado. This is the largest deployment of U.S. forces in Europe since the end of the Cold War, 25 years ago. It's part of the European Reassurance Initiative and Operation Atlantic Resolve, a $3.5 billion effort paid for by the United States to reinforce NATO. The Army is anxious to deliver a serious message. To demonstrate to allies and adversaries alike, the U.S. is determined to assist NATO in defending Eastern Europe from potential aggression from Russia.
The combat power here is a tangible sign of the continued commitment of the United States of America. It is one that enables us to work with our allies and send a message that we remain committed.
You've got tanks here.
Brigade Commander Colonel Christopher Norrie describes his unit as lethal.
We're an Armor Brigade combat team. So as part of that team, we have tanks, Bradleys, we have indirect fire systems, Paladins. We have a whole range of vehicles that make up our team here. You can see now you've got one ship here, one ship there, both offloading all of our equipment in preparation for onward movement.
Norrie's troops spent the past year training for this mission.
What's up? Iron Strong!
Algernon Lewis and Thomas Rodriguez are Army mechanics.
This is my first time in Europe. Pretty excited to be here. Kind of miss home, but it's also nice to be over here helping out our NATO allies.
These soldiers concede, outside of their families, few folks back home may know about their assignment.
Probably not. Probably not, honestly. I don't think they do.
I don't think a lot of them know what NATO actually does.
And then in 2020, North Macedonia also joined NATO. So since the end of the Soviet Union, NATO has pretty much doubled, and I thought this would be important information given the current time and also in relation to other videos I plan to make.